Maple Ridge was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened, until it did. Tucked between pine forests and quiet lakes, it was a town where everyone waved to each other and left their doors unlocked, until the notes started appearing. It began with a single letter, found taped to the front door of the Blake family's home. The envelope was white, the handwriting bold and shaky like it had been written by someone who didn't want to be recognized. No address, no stamp, just one line across the front. For those who think they're safe. Inside was a note, typewritten on yellowed paper. You don't know me yet, but I know you. I watch, I wait, I remember. The first will be quick, the rest less so. Yours, the Watcher. Sheriff Arlen Pike thought it was a prank. Kids maybe trying to stir up a Halloween scare in the middle of June. He told the Blakes to toss the note. But 3 days later, a second letter appeared, this time on the windshield of a high school teacher's car. The same message, the same signature, the Watcher. Maple Ridge began to buzz. Rumors floated through grocery store aisles, over gas station counters, and during Sunday sermons. Sheriff Pike, a man who hadn't drawn his weapon in a decade, now carried it on his hip everywhere he went. He had deputies patrolling neighborhoods, reviewing camera footage, interviewing anyone who might know something. Still, there were no prints, no DNA, nothing. Then came the third letter, and the first murder. Amy Caldwell was 23, a waitress at Jerry's Diner. Sweet, reliable, engaged to her high school sweetheart. She didn't come home from her shift on Friday night. Her fiancé found her car still parked behind the diner, her phone on the dashboard, and a white envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. The note simply said, "She smiled at me once. I wanted to see her smile again, so I made sure it stayed." Amy's body was found 2 days later in the lake, her lips sewn into a permanent, horrifying smile. Maple Ridge panicked. The sheriff called in the FBI. News trucks rolled into town. Doors stopped being left unlocked. And still, the Watcher watched. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew who would be next. But someone did. Her name was Elise Marlowe. She was a journalist who'd grown up in Maple Ridge and left after high school. But when she saw Amy Caldwell's face flash across her news feed, something pulled her back. It wasn't just the murder. It was the note, because she had seen that signature before. Years ago, in a box her mother had kept hidden in the attic. A letter addressed to her father, who disappeared in 1994 and was never found. The signature back then was the same, the Watcher. She returned to Maple Ridge the next morning, camera in one hand, notebook in the other, determined to uncover the truth. She didn't believe in coincidences, and she knew this wasn't the first time the Watcher had struck. The FBI brushed her off. Sheriff Pike told her to leave the investigation to the professionals. But Elise wasn't asking for permission. She was following something that felt bigger than just Maple Ridge. She visited her childhood home, dusty, boarded up. Her mother had died 3 years earlier, and the house had sat empty since. Elise walked up the attic stairs, remembering the spot where she found the letter, and it was still there, tucked inside an old cigar box, wrapped in newspaper dated 1994, the same typewritten style, the same cryptic message, the same closing line, "Yours, the Watcher." But this letter was even more chilling. It included a name, Ted Bundy, not as the sender, as the inspiration. The letter read, "They say monsters like Bundy die, but they don't. They evolve. They learn. They watch." Elise sat frozen in the attic. Was this just someone obsessed with true crime? Or was it something more? She compared the letters, 1994 and 2023, identical formatting, same typewriter font, same use of dashes. Whoever this was hadn't just reappeared. He'd never left. Elise left the attic with the letter and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Pike took one look and waved her into his office. They sat down. "You think it's the same person?" he asked. "I think we're dealing with someone who idolized Bundy, someone who's been practicing for a long time, someone who thinks killing is art." Pike nodded slowly. "Then we need to stop them before the next canvas is painted." But as Elise would soon discover, the Watcher already had. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel. The morning fog clung to Maple Ridge like a ghost refusing to move on. Elise Marlowe stood at the edge of her mother's lawn, staring at the mailbox. There, just beneath the metal flap, sat another envelope, white, unmarked, sealed with tape. Her breath caught. Slowly, she reached out and peeled it free, her fingers trembling. Inside, a familiar sheet of yellowed paper. Typewritten. He remembered her eyes, so he carved them into memory. No signature this time, but Elise didn't need one. She clutched the paper and ran inside. Sheriff Pike arrived minutes later, summoned by her shaking voice. He read the note in silence, then turned to Elise. "Is anyone missing?" she asked. He nodded grimly. "A woman named Karen West, school librarian, didn't show up to work this morning. Her husband reported her missing." Karen West. Elise knew her, the kind woman who let her check out more than 5 books at a time in middle school. "She lived 2 streets over," Pike added. It was placed here on purpose." "For me," Elise said. Pike didn't argue. They found Karen West that afternoon. Her body was discovered propped against a tree in Pine Hollow Park, arms gently crossed, eyes wide open, glass marbles placed inside the sockets. Her real eyes were missing. Tape held her mouth shut. Her hands were clean. No signs of struggle. Another envelope lay in her lap. This one addressed to Elise. "You dig up bones, but be careful, some still bite." The crime scene was cordoned off. Reporters swarmed like locusts. FBI agents arrived by dusk, one of them pulling Elise aside. "Special Agent Dana Ross," she introduced herself. "You're the journalist with the attic letters?" Elise nodded. "I believe whoever's doing this started decades ago. My father tried to stop him in '94. He disappeared, and now it's starting again." Ross narrowed her eyes. "You think this is connected to Ted Bundy?" "I think it's someone obsessed with him, copying him, evolving him." Ross didn't laugh. She looked intrigued. "We've seen it before. Bundy had followers, sick ones. Some even tried to recreate his crimes. But this one's different," Elise whispered. "He writes. He warns. He watches." Ross glanced toward the body bag being zipped shut. "Well, he's watching now. Let's watch back." That night, Elise returned to the attic. It was cold, quiet, the air stale with old memories. She laid the new note beside her father's original, comparing font sizes, ink smears, indentations. Identical. Her father had noted one thing in his journal before he vanished. "He writes like a poet but kills like a surgeon." Elise flipped the journal pages, stopping at one scribbled phrase. "Follow the letters. Not just the words. The letters. A code?" She grabbed every letter she'd collected. From her father's box, the Blakes, the diner, and now Karen West's. Laying them side by side, she circled the first letter of every sentence. Spelled Marlowe. Her name. Was it a warning or a challenge? The town was changing. Children no longer played outside. Coffee shops closed early. Every face on the street wore suspicion like a mask. Elise met with Sheriff Pike and Agent Ross the next morning at the station. She showed them the letters, the code. "This person, he's not just killing, he's performing. Every act is designed to provoke, to lure. And now he's pulled me into it." Ross tapped the paper. "We'll run the code through behavioral analysis. But you need to be careful. If he's fixated on you, he'll escalate." Pike added, "And if this is personal, he might know you better than we think." Elise nodded, but in her gut, a chill set in. She'd always thought Maple Ridge was safe because everyone knew each other. Now she realized that might be exactly why they weren't. The third murder was different. Not public, not poetic. It happened in the shadows. An elderly man named Harold Finch was found in his basement. Strangled. No letter, no marbles, no notes. But scratched into the cement beneath his body were 3 words. "Not everyone watches." Elise didn't understand. Ross did. "This one wasn't about you. It was about us." "What do you mean?" Elise asked. He's testing the system, seeing how long it takes us to find him, how many mistakes we make. He's getting bolder. Pike slammed his fist on the table. Then we flush him out. We set a trap. Ross shook her head. No, we let him set one, and we follow it. Elise swallowed. You mean let someone die? Ross looked away. Not die. If he's watching, then so are we. We need to know where he's looking. Elise hated the plan, but she knew it made sense. Still, in the back of her mind, a memory flickered. A man, a neighbor, from when she was a child. He always waved too long, lingered too close, smiled too wide. She didn't remember his name, but suddenly, she couldn't stop thinking about his face. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel. The smell of pine and damp earth clung to the air as Elise Marlowe walked down Ash Grove Lane, retracing a path she hadn't taken in years. Each house sat in silence, some newly painted, others sagging under time's weight. But all of them were watching, just like he was. She reached the end of the block and stopped in front of a blue, two-story home with white shutters. Her childhood memory painted it pale yellow, cheerful. But now it looked washed out, forgotten. A shadow in the shape of a house. Number 19. She remembered it from her father's journals. It wasn't just the home of the neighbor who lingered. It was the last address James Marlowe had visited before vanishing. He had written a single name next to it in his notes. Calvin Reed. She didn't remember him clearly, only the discomfort. The way his eyes seemed to stay on her a moment too long. A strange gift he once gave her. A porcelain clown that used to sit on her nightstand until she screamed during a thunderstorm and her mother threw it out. Now Elise stood on his porch, her heart pounding. She knocked. No answer. She glanced through the front window. The curtains were drawn, but in the faint sliver of space between them, she saw movement. A flicker. A figure? She knocked again. Still nothing. The next morning, she returned, with Agent Ross beside her and a warrant in hand. What they found inside changed everything. The living room was obsessively clean. Neat rows of true crime books lined the shelves, many bookmarked. Bundy, Dahmer, Gacy, Ramirez, and Ted Bundy. His face stared from the covers more times than Elise could count. In the kitchen, old newspapers were stacked in columns, all clipped around local disappearances and murders going back 3 decades. A corkboard hung on the wall above the dining table. Dozens of photos, victims, Elise's father, even Elise herself, shots taken within the last month. Ross examined the board carefully. This isn't just obsession, it's documentation. Stalking, Elise whispered. They continued through the house. The basement door was locked, but the key was in a drawer beneath the sink. When it opened, the smell of mildew hit them like a wave. They descended slowly. In the dim glow of the single bulb, the basement revealed itself. A table covered with surgical tools, clean, sharp, organized. A mannequin in the corner wearing a wedding dress, Amy Caldwell's dress, and a typewriter. Elise stepped forward and touched it. The keys matched the notes, the ribbons still inked. This was where the Watcher had written his poetry of death. Then Ross found the trunk. Inside, teeth, earrings, a child's backpack, and a pair of marble eyes. Ross turned to Elise. We need to bring him in, now. But Calvin Reed wasn't there. His car was gone. And in his place, one final note sat taped to the basement wall. You looked too close, so now I'll disappear. But the story isn't over, Elise. Not even close. You'll see. Soon. Yours, the Watcher. The town of Maple Ridge shook. News vans camped outside Reed's home. Families packed and left. Schools closed. A vigil was held for the dead, but no one felt peace. Sheriff Pike held a press conference, calling Calvin Reed the primary suspect in the Watcher case. A warrant was issued nationwide. But Elise knew better. This wasn't over. Reed had planned this, vanished with precision. And worst of all, he had her name, her routines, her family. And as she stood in her childhood bedroom that night, phone in hand, trying to call her sister to check on her niece, she heard a tap on the window. She turned. And there, pressed against the glass, was a single white envelope. Inside, "The next chapter is yours. Make it count." Signed, The Watcher. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel. Elise didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of her childhood bedroom, the white envelope still clutched in her hand like a live wire. Every creak in the floor, every passing car outside. She flinched. The Watcher had been here, not just in her town, not just in the basement of a neighbor's house. He was at her window, close enough to watch her breathe. Agent Ross had arrived within the hour. His face was pale but not surprised. He had been tracking killers long enough to know. Monsters don't vanish, they evolve. "This isn't just a killer on the run," he said quietly. "He wants you to chase him." Elise glanced down at the letter again. "The next chapter is yours. Make it count." He was taunting her. And worse, he was assigning her a role. The investigation into Calvin Reed's past turned into a nationwide search. Every identity he ever used, every place he ever worked, each property he ever bought under an alias. It all became a breadcrumb. But there were too many, and none of them had fingerprints. He was a ghost wearing flesh. But Elise didn't stop. She went back through her father's journals, this time with a red pen. She looked for anything he might have missed. Patterns, cryptic notes, addresses. It was then she saw it. 1979 visit to Hartley Institution. Interviewed patient. CR. Filed under Jane Doe 47. Not public record. Highly disturbed. Possible link to Maple Ridge disappearances. Jane Doe. Initials CR. Calvin Reed. Her father had met him once. He had even warned of the danger. But no one listened. Just like they didn't listen when Bundy charmed his way through courtroom after courtroom. People preferred monsters in masks, not the ones wearing smiles. The Hartley Institution had long since been shut down, after a fire in the early 80s killed 3 patients and destroyed most of the records. But Elise and Ross visited the ruins anyway. The bones of the place remained. Steel bed frames, scorched walls, rusted sinks. The air still smelled of antiseptic and ash. In what was left of the rec room, they found it. A steel locker. Inside, a shoebox of old letters addressed only to Darlene. All of them typed. All of them ending with, "Yours, the Watcher." One of them chilled Elise to her core. "She thinks I'm her brother. It's better this way. When you wear the right face, you can walk through any door, even into their hearts." Elise stared at the letter. This isn't just obsession anymore. This is identity theft. Emotional mimicry. He becomes whoever they want him to be. Ross nodded slowly. "And if we don't catch him, he's going to become someone else again. Someone even closer." Back in Maple Ridge, funerals were being planned. Amy Caldwell's family held a private memorial, but her mother collapsed before the service began. The entire town felt infected. Every neighbor now a potential suspect. Every sound at night a possible intrusion. And then came the second body. A hiker near Cedar Hollow stumbled across a shallow grave. The corpse was wrapped in plastic with one hand exposed. Nails painted purple, 2 rings missing. Dental records confirmed it. Jamie Prescott, reported missing in 1999. 24 years gone. Buried just 10 miles from where the Watcher's letters had first started. The coroner's report was brutal. The girl had been strangled, just like the others. The Watcher wasn't a recent creation. He had been killing for decades. Ross called Elise immediately. "We're not dealing with a spree killer. This is serial. Cold, careful. He's been doing this longer than Bundy ever did. We need to reframe everything." Elise could feel the pressure building in her skull. The nausea, the dread. She turned on the bedroom lamp and opened her laptop. Dozens of cold cases. Young women. Similar traits. Slight build. Brunette. Single. Often new to town. Most had no known enemies. Most were written off as runaways. All vanished near Maple Ridge or in surrounding counties. She mapped the disappearances. Each location formed a pattern. Not a circle, not a web, a spiral. And at the center, Maple Ridge Elementary School. She blinked. Why there? Then she remembered something. When she was 9, Calvin Reed volunteered at her school. He was part of the Reading Buddies program. She remembered his teeth. Too white, too wide, and a story he told about wolves that wore suits. She never forgot it. "He's not just a neighbor," she said aloud. "He's been shaping this town for decades." She pulled out the latest envelope again, the one taped to her window. This time, she noticed something strange. Under the fold, almost invisible, a watermark. She tilted it toward the light. It wasn't a printer mark. It was a seal. Department of Corrections, 1981. Ross ran the records, and there it was. Calvin Reed had once been committed as a juvenile offender. Name changed, file sealed, but he'd escaped during a transfer, faked his own death, and no one ever followed up. Until now. Later that night, Elise returned to her motel. Her phone buzzed. No caller ID. She answered anyway. Nothing. Then a soft voice. "Do you remember the clown I gave you? You screamed. But I never meant to scare you, Elise. That was just the beginning." She froze. "Calvin." But the voice laughed. A dry, emotionless rasp. "Names are just costumes. You'll understand soon." The line went dead. She dropped the phone and ran to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. Her mouth tasted like metal. She was shaking when she looked up into the mirror and screamed. On the mirror, written in red lipstick, "You're next." For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel. The mirror was still fogged when Agent Ross arrived. Elise hadn't touched the message, hadn't even moved from the bathroom floor. Her back against the cold tub, knees drawn to her chest, her hands trembling. The lipstick writing had begun to drip, a blood-like smear down the glass. Ross stepped inside and froze. "Jesus, I didn't do it," Elise whispered. "He was here. He watched me again." He gently took her elbow and helped her up. "We'll sweep the room. But if he got this close, it means he wanted to be seen." She nodded. "He's building up to something." The motel was locked down. Forensics dispatched, but there were no fingerprints, no camera footage, just a partial boot print left on the carpet, military grade, and a faint scent of cologne. It was subtle, but Elise knew it. Calvin used to wear it when he read to her class. The same scent that made her skin crawl. Ross paced the room. This guy isn't just sending notes. He's orchestrating fear. He wants you off balance. Elise walked to the desk where the typewritten letter had sat. She opened the drawer, and inside, neatly folded, was a new envelope. She hadn't seen it before. It read, "You're doing well, Elise. I'm proud." Just like he was. Beneath the note was an old photograph. Her father, James Marlowe, smiling, standing next to a man with his arm around him. Face blurred with age, but Elise recognized the stance. The posture. Calvin Reed. "He knew my dad," Elise whispered. "Not just from an interview. They were close." Ross examined the photo. "We need to dig into your father's past more than ever." The next morning, Elise and Ross visited the Maple Ridge Historical Society. Inside dusty archives and yellowed town records, they found what they were looking for: photos of a town charity event from 1979. One image showed James Marlowe at a fundraiser with a group of foster children. Among them, Calvin. He wasn't a neighbor. He had lived with them. Elise's hands shook. "My parents took him in." Ross placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is deeper than we thought. He was inside your home. Your family." Back at the station, Sheriff Pike delivered more bad news. Another body had been found. This one at the base of Hollow Creek. Wrapped in plastic just like Jamie Prescott. Only this victim had a necklace Elise recognized immediately. It had belonged to her mother. DNA confirmed it. Her mother hadn't died in a car crash as Elise had always been told. She had been murdered. The autopsy showed signs of asphyxiation and post-mortem bruising. The car crash had been staged. Elise collapsed in the hallway. Everything had been a lie. Ross found her later, curled on a bench outside the morgue. She didn't look up. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," he said quietly. Because now we know what he's doing. He didn't just want to be near you. He wanted to erase and replace everything. He wanted to become the architect of your pain. Why? Because your father figured him out, and your family paid the price. That night, Elise returned to her childhood home, alone. She stood in the hallway, staring at the picture frames. Her mother smiling, her father holding her on his lap. And now she knew. Somewhere in the background of all that love, a shadow had been lurking. She opened the attic. Inside, dust floated in beams of moonlight. Boxes lined the walls. She opened one labeled James Research. Inside, she found pages of letters, photos, notes about Maple Ridge disappearances, patterns that matched Calvin's known victims. Then she found the tape recorder. Her father's voice crackled to life. If anything happens to me, know that it started with the boy we took in, Calvin Reed. He isn't who we thought. He knows how to pretend, how to blend. I believe he killed Darlene. Elise clutched the recorder to her chest. Her mother's name, Darlene. He had killed her, covered it up, and kept Elise close, waiting, watching. Then, behind her, a floorboard creaked. She turned, slowly. A figure stood in the attic doorway. Pale mask, black hoodie, knife in hand. Elise stepped back, but the figure raised a finger to its lips. Shoo, it's just me, Elise. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel. The attic was silent, so still that Elise could hear the faint buzz of the street lamp outside bleeding through the slats in the roof. But all her focus was locked on the figure in the doorway. The mask, the knife, the voice that didn't shout or threaten, just whispered, "It's just me, Elise. Just family." She backed into the far wall, heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "Calvin," her voice cracked. "What do you want?" The figure tilted his head. "Not Calvin. Not anymore. You know that. I've always been who you needed." He stepped forward, and moonlight caught the edge of the blade in his hand. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come here? To finish what your father started." His voice had the soft tone of someone reciting a bedtime story. "He thought he could expose me, but he never saw the whole picture. None of them did." Elise's fingers brushed the edge of the tape recorder still in her hand. She pressed the hidden record button behind her back. "I know what you did to my mother," she said, louder now, forcing strength into her words. The figure paused. "She got in the way. She wasn't supposed to be home that day. She heard too much. You killed her. I saved you," he said simply. "You could have gone into the system. You could have ended up like me." She reached slowly for the fire poker leaning near the window. He didn't move, just watched her, mask unmoving. "I was your family," he whispered. "I was the one who stayed." Then a crash from downstairs. The front door had been kicked in. "Elise!" It was Ross's voice, shouting from below. The figure's head snapped toward the attic stairs. Elise didn't wait. She swung the fire poker. It hit him square in the ribs. He grunted, stumbled backward. She lunged past him, down the stairs, nearly slipping on the dust-slick wood. "Ross!" she screamed. He met her halfway up, gun drawn. "Where is he?" "Upstairs." But the attic was empty. Only the mask remained, dropped near the edge of the hatch. By morning, the house was crawling with investigators. Ross and Sheriff Pike swept every inch. There was no sign of forced entry except the footprints in the attic, leading to a second exit Elise didn't know existed. A back crawl space that led through the walls and out into the woods. "He knows this house better than we do," Ross muttered, flipping through James Marlowe's research. In the pages were details about Calvin's past, entries that James had kept private even from Darlene, a record of Calvin's escalating behaviors, fires, dead animals, disappearances of neighbors' pets. "He was already unraveling," Elise said, "but Dad tried to help him." "Your father was smart," Ross replied. "Too smart. Calvin couldn't let him live." And now Elise understood. The car accident that killed her father wasn't random. Calvin had been behind it too. "I think I know where he's going," Elise said. There's one place he always visited. It was an old, decaying farmhouse on the edge of Maple Ridge, the one Elise and her father had driven past during Sunday rides. Her father had once said, "This house hides more than termites." They went there now. The driveway was overgrown, no signs of life, but the front door was cracked open. "Stay behind me," Ross warned, gun drawn again. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of mildew, but something else too, something sharp. Blood. A body lay near the stairs, Sheriff Pike. Throat slit, eyes open. Ross swore under his breath. There was no time to mourn. Footsteps creaked above. They moved as one, Ross up front, Elise behind. Each stair groaned beneath their weight. At the top was a narrow hallway, lined with rooms that hadn't been touched in decades. From one of them, a sound, a slow, deliberate dragging. Ross signaled to Elise to wait. He turned the knob, pushed the door open. The room was wallpapered in missing person posters. Faces Elise recognized: Jamie Prescott, Officer Delgado, her mother, and in the center of the room, a shrine to Elise. Photos from her childhood, her graduation, even her first day as a reporter, all laid out in perfect order. "I kept you close," a voice said behind them. Calvin. He stepped from the shadows. This time he wasn't wearing a mask. His face was pale, gaunt, eyes bloodshot, but calm. "I wanted you to see it, to know it was all for you." Ross raised his gun. "Hands where I can see them." Calvin ignored him, looked only at Elise. "You understand now, don't you? Why I had to do it?" Elise didn't answer. He stepped closer. "I cleaned up this town. I did what your father was too weak to do." "By killing people?" she spat. "By removing rot," he hissed. "People who hurt others." "Jamie?" "She sold pills to kids." "Delgado?" "He beat his wife." "Your mother?" "She lied." Ross stepped forward. "Don't move. I was protecting you, Elise," Calvin whispered. "All these years. You were mine to protect." Then, in one swift motion, he reached into his jacket. Ross fired. The bullet hit Calvin in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. He gasped, coughed, blood spattering his lips. Elise stepped over him, looked into his eyes. "I was never yours." Calvin Reed died en route to the hospital. In the days that followed, the town mourned, but they also uncovered decades of lies. Behind Calvin's mask had been a trail of victims stretching back 30 years. DNA connected him to unsolved murders across several states. The Watcher letters had stopped, but the fear would linger. Elise stood at her father's grave. She placed the recorder there. Let the tape play one last time. "If you're hearing this, Elise, then the past has come due. But you're stronger than you know. Keep digging. The truth is your weapon." She wiped her tears. "I found it, Dad. All of it." For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel. The attic was silent. Elise stared at the masked figure, heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. The knife glinted in the moonlight, and the whisper still rang in her mind. Just family. Her body froze, instincts screaming to run, but her legs refused to obey. The mask tilted, studying her, then slowly lowered. The hood came down. Calvin Reed, older now, gaunt, eyes hollow but burning with a twisted warmth. He looked at her the way someone admires a portrait they've spent years painting. "Elise," he whispered, "you found the truth, just like your father did." She took a slow step back. "Why?" "Because he betrayed me," Calvin said. "He promised he'd never leave me behind, promised I was family. But once he saw who I really was, he tried to erase me, just like he tried to erase the truth about your mother." He inched forward. "But I never left, Elise. I stayed. I watched you grow up. I made sure you were safe." "You killed them," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "You murdered my mother, and Jamie, and God knows how many others." Calvin smiled faintly. "I cleansed the rot. Your mother was going to expose me. Jamie was too curious. They were threats to the family I was trying to protect." She gripped the recorder tighter. "You call this protection?" His smile faded. "You don't understand now, but you will." A creak from downstairs snapped their attention. Ross's voice called up, "Elise, are you okay?" Calvin moved like a shadow. He darted into the corner of the attic, disappearing behind a stack of boxes. "Ross!" Elise screamed. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Ross burst into the attic just as Calvin lunged from the shadows. A struggle erupted, grunts, crashing wood, the glint of steel. Ross managed to tackle Calvin, but the masked man clawed free, slashing toward Elise. She ducked, grabbing an old curtain rod, and swung with all her strength, cracked against his ribs. He roared in pain, stumbled, and Ross landed a final punch that sent him crashing to the floor, unconscious. Elise collapsed, sobbing, while Ross cuffed Calvin's hands behind his back. "It's over," Ross said, breathless, but Elise shook her head. "No, it's not." 2 days later, Elise sat in the sheriff's office, listening to the interrogation recording. Ross's voice, "Why target Elise's family?" Calvin, calm and cold, "Because they were mine too. I loved them. They just didn't love me back." The room chilled. Sheriff Pike stepped in. FBI confirmed Calvin's prints at all 3 murder scenes. He's being transferred to federal custody. Elise nodded numbly. Ross looked at her. "You did it. You cracked it wide open." She stared out the window, eyes distant. "I didn't do anything. I just survived." That night, Elise returned to her classroom. The kids were gone. The desks were quiet. She walked to her desk and opened the drawer. Inside, a tiny music box sat, one she hadn't seen before. She opened it. A lullaby played. Inside was a note. "You found me, but you'll never forget me. The Watcher." Her breath caught. A noise behind her. She turned and saw nothing but her reflection in the darkened window. But she knew, somewhere. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel. The streets of Ridgeway had returned to silence, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the sky is still gray, the trees still bent from the wind, and no one quite knows if it's truly over. Elise knew that feeling all too well. She lived it now. Every knock at the door made her flinch. Every shadow stretched too long, and every whisper of wind sounded like the echo of footsteps. It had been 3 weeks since Calvin Reed, the Watcher, was dragged out of her attic. 3 weeks since the masked terror of her past was unmasked as someone she used to call Uncle Cal. He was behind the deaths of her mother, her best friend Jamie, and even the anonymous letters that started it all. But the Watcher didn't act alone. The investigation was supposed to be winding down, but Ross came to her house that morning, pale-faced and tight-lipped. Elise hadn't seen that look on him since the attic. He didn't speak at first. He simply placed a small evidence bag on her kitchen table. Inside was a second note. Different handwriting. Same haunting signature. "The story's not over, Elise." He wasn't the only one watching. Elise stared at it. "Another letter?" Ross nodded. "We had him in custody, Elise. Solitary. This wasn't from Calvin." She felt her stomach churn. "You think it's a copycat?" He hesitated. "I think it's worse. Calvin may have been the blade, but someone else was the hand." The FBI reviewed everything. Surveillance tapes, phone logs, Calvin's journals. There were mentions of them. Elise had dismissed it at first, thinking it was the ravings of a paranoid killer. But now, those journal entries felt like warnings. "They said they'd keep me safe if I did what they asked. I left the signs like they told me to. They said she had to be tested. I didn't kill Elise's mom because I wanted to. I did it because they made me choose." The FBI agents weren't saying much, but Elise overheard 2 of them whispering near her front door. "She's not out of danger. If this is bigger than Calvin, we've barely scratched the surface." Elise didn't want to believe it. She wanted to close the book, end the nightmare, go back to being a schoolteacher who worried about lunch breaks and math quizzes. But something had been unlocked, something that couldn't be shut. At the sheriff's office, Ross showed her a new piece of evidence. It was a photograph found buried under Calvin's floorboards. It was her mother, standing beside a man Elise had never seen before. In the photo, her mother looked younger, happy, but in her eyes something else. Fear. The man beside her was wearing a ring. The same one Elise had seen in a dream weeks ago. The same ring Calvin had described in his rants, when he screamed in his sleep from his jail cell. The ring, the silver ring. They never took it off. Ross had run the photo through every state and federal database. No match. He turned to Elise. We think this man is the real watcher. Calvin. He might have been just the beginning. Elise didn't sleep that night. She sat in her bedroom, holding the music box in her hands, turning the note over and over again. The lullaby inside it wasn't just any lullaby. It was the song. The one her mother used to hum when Elise was scared. There was no way Calvin could have known that. She remembered him being kind once, reading her bedtime stories, making shadow puppets on the wall. But he never stayed in the house overnight, never tucked her in. He couldn't have heard that song, not unless someone else told him, or unless someone else had been watching from much earlier than she thought. Days passed. Elise tried to return to work. She smiled for her students, laughed at their jokes, but her eyes kept drifting toward the windows, toward the street, toward the shadows. And one afternoon, just as school ended, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A car, old, black, unmarked, parked across from the school, the engine running, windows tinted too dark. It had been there the day before, too, and the day before that. Ross came immediately when she called, but by the time he arrived, the car was gone. No plates, no trace. You're not crazy, he told her. I believe you, but belief didn't bring safety. One night, Elise found herself driving to the old cabin on the outskirts of Ridgeway, the place where Calvin had once said he found peace. She didn't know why she went, only that something was pulling her there. Inside, it was abandoned, dusty, smelled of rot and mildew. But in the back, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, was a box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to the watcher. Some were from Calvin, but others weren't. They were signed only with a symbol, a single I crudely drawn. The letters talked about assignments, surveillance, obedience, and Elise's name appeared in more than one. The girl is the key. Her bloodline must be protected. The father failed. The mother interfered. She must be tested. Elise stumbled back from the box. Her heart pounded in her throat. This wasn't just about Calvin. This was a group, a cult, a network, and Elise had been the target from the start. Back in town, she gave the box to the FBI. They launched a task force immediately. Her home was placed under federal protection. Cameras, motion sensors, armed guards. But still, the letters came, slipped under her door, left on her pillow, tucked into her mailbox, even when it was locked. Each one said the same thing: we are still watching. The final night came with a storm. Lightning cracked the sky. Power went out across Ridgeway, and Elise stood alone in her living room, flashlight in hand, staring at her reflection in the darkened TV screen. A knock at the door. She froze. Then another, harder this time. She stepped forward, heart in her throat, looked through the peephole. No one, just darkness. But when she opened the door, a single item lay on the ground. A wedding ring, her mother's ring, the one buried with her. Elise picked it up with trembling hands. There was a note inside it. She kept secrets. You carry them now. Behind her, the music box began to play. She turned. It was open, even though she hadn't touched it. And on the mirror above the fireplace, a message written in condensation. You were never alone. The screen fades to black. Text appears. The watcher may be behind bars, but the watchers remain. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel.